Now may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
Amen.
So as I was just saying, this is the first Sunday for nearly 5 months that you're meeting together for worship in your church building, at least some of you. And for me too, it's the first time that I've joined a congregation in church on a Sunday since the start of the pandemic. Now, given that is our context, the Gospel reading that we've just heard resonates for me with a very particular poignancy. As I was preparing for this service and reading through the passage, and again just now, I couldn't help but hear it through the lens of our recent experiences. It seems to speak very directly into our situation as we continue to live with the impact of COVID-19 on our lives. For most of us, I suspect, the Gospel reading is an old, familiar one, the feeding of the 5,000. But well known though it is, if we care to look, we will discover new insights pertinent for our time. Like so many biblical texts written in a particular time and place, it feels amazingly fresh and contemporary. It feels remarkably pertinent. So I invite you to come with me as we take a closer look. It's perhaps worth noticing, first of all, what comes directly before the verses that we've just heard. Just before the feeding of the 5,000 is the account of John the Baptist's death. Our passage, today's passage, began, "Now when Jesus heard this," and the "this" refers to John's beheading. So, a dreadful and distressing event has caused Jesus to withdraw from people. Our passage began, "Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew to a deserted place by himself." Does that ring any bells? For me, it mirrors something of our own experiences in lockdown, driven by the dangers and fears caused by the pandemic, by the distress, by the illness, by the anxiety, driven to withdraw to our homes, to deserted places, if you like, and to stay there by ourselves. And so it is that we're now drawn into the story ourselves, wondering where it may take us next. Matthew recounts that the crowds followed Jesus, that he had compassion for them and cured the sick. But this story isn't just about Jesus and what he does. The story issues a challenge to us in terms of what it means to be disciples of this Jesus, to have compassion like him, and to respond to need where we see it. At the heart of Jesus' ministry is an invitation for us to be connected, to be part of a community. And this is in stark contrast to the regulations during this pandemic which have separated us one from another. And it's also in stark contrast more generally to 21st century Western culture, which often puts more emphasis on the individual than it does on the community. Jesus, his disciples, and the crowd are in a deserted place. The hour is late and the people are getting hungry. Not unreasonably, the disciples suggest that it's time to break up the party, to send folk away so that they can go and get food for themselves. Jesus' response is quite radical. It also is quite confusing and it is extraordinary. They need not go away, he says. You give them something to eat. How utterly bizarre that must have seemed to the disciples. And yet I can't help wondering if 2,000 years later, there isn't an echo of the same command which we, the church, need to hear afresh now. There are people all around us who are hungry in so many ways, in all kinds of need. They are grieving, angry, frightened, searching for meaning, longing for comfort. Don't ignore them or send them away to sort themselves out, Jesus seems to be saying. You give them something to eat. You respond to their need. There is, I think, no getting away from this. If we are in relationship with this Jesus who had such compassion on the crowds and commanded his disciples to give them something to eat, then we cannot avoid the call which demands that we too serve others, no matter how unreasonable or extraordinary that may seem. We can't step back and expect others to do something, but instead we must look to see how it is that we might each play our part, both as individuals and also as a church community. What, me, you might say? Us here at St. Catherine's, but we have so little to offer. Only 5 loaves and 2 fish. Only this building, a couple of clergy and lay ministers. How can we possibly meet the needs of our community in these extraordinary times when we have so many troubles of our own? See, the danger is that so often we start from a place of scarcity, of noticing what we don't have, whereas Jesus starts from a place of plenty. Look at what you do have, he seems to be saying, and don't worry about what you don't have. The crucial point in this story is, of course, that however small the contribution, if it is offered to God, it will be accepted, blessed, and used in unimaginable ways, just like the 5 loaves and 2 fish were. Jesus took them, blessed them, and used them to feed 5,000 plus people, and with plenty left over to spare, an image of the abundance of God's generosity. So what is the little that you might have to offer? What is it that you might offer to God that might be blessed and used in the service of others and of God's kingdom? This is a question for each of us, for you and for me. And it's also a question for you as a church community to ponder together. Whatever it is, you may think that it is meagre and unimportant. A small amount of money, a little bit of time, a commitment to pray, to demonstrate God's love and compassion through acts of kindness, of gentleness, of forgiveness. And you may not even see the results of your efforts in the way that the disciples did through the gathering up of all the crumbs. They could see that the crowds had been fed and there was plenty left over. And yet we trust that in God's economy, nothing is too small, nothing is lost, and nothing is wasted, whether we see that or not. And the last thing that strikes me about this reading is that we don't know in this story where the loaves and fish have come from or whose offering they were. In John's version of this story, you will recall that a little boy provides the loaves and fish. But here in Matthew, the disciples simply say, "We have nothing here but 2 loaves and 5 fish." It's not that some people have a share in Jesus' ministry with something to offer, however small, while others are simply passive recipients. Rather, we are all called to give what we can, and we are all called also to receive from others, and to recognize God at work in the lives of others, even those whom we may think of as unworthy or empty-handed. The 5,000 plus who were gathered were all fed by Jesus, even the disciples. And it's in the knowledge of our own need, as well as the call to be generous, that together we come to the table of our Lord at the Eucharist. We come with our meagre riches and with recognition of our need of others. We come to be blessed in the breaking and sharing of bread, which is the body of Christ. And in this season, some will come through spiritual communion. And together we will grow deeper in faith and commit once again to loving service of God's word.